First and fourth, Scottish Eye presents new evidence on the mystery surrounding the death of SNP activist Willie MacRae.
Ladies and gentlemen, what did we learn from this inquiry? First, I hope that all of you learned, if you hadn't known ever before, that all of you learned that you don't trust the political establishment in Scotland or in Britain. And that's lesson number one.
Willie MacRae was an extraordinary man. Born in 1923, he represented the Scottish National Party in 4 general elections and rose to become its vice chairman. During the war, he fought in France and India, became a friend of Indira Gandhi, and gave clandestine help to India's freedom fighters. His career ranged from a spell in military intelligence to helping write Israel's mercantile law.
Was Willie MacRae a man with enemies?
All great people have enemies. Whether your name is Gandhi or Martin Luther King or Jean Jaurès or Christ, all great people have enemies. I should say the establishment in the country was an enemy of Willie MacRae.
In 1980, at the Mulwarcher inquiry, MacRae played the key role in defeating plans by the UK Atomic Energy Authority to dump nuclear waste beneath the hills of Ayrshire. MacRae was feted as the hero of the anti-dumping lobby, and in the build-up to the 1986 inquiry into expansion at Dounreay, that lobby was again pinning many of its hopes on his skills. But Willie MacRae was never to appear.
Just a few days before he died, he reckoned that he'd found something. He was involved, or going to be involved in an inquiry into the nuclear industry appertaining to Scotland. And he said that he'd now got something that they wouldn't be able to wriggle out of. And he really was, he could be like that, you know, quite devilish. And he slapped the table and he was delighted.
At the same time, MacRae expressed deep concern over the death of Hilda Murrell, who was murdered in mysterious circumstances some months earlier. She too had been preparing a case against nuclear expansion, in her case at Sizewell. It has since been claimed her death came during a bungled break-in at her Shrewsbury home by the security services. Before MacRae died, his holiday home in Kintail was broken into. The same thing had happened at Murrell's holiday home in Wales, shortly before she was murdered.
I don't think anything that mattered at all was taken. Willie did mention it to me because, again, he was quite gleeful over it. His words to me were, they didn't get what they were looking for.
We were driving round the corner on the bend of the road that we're standing beside today, on our way to Skye, and we were hailed by somebody who turned out to be an Australian tourist who indicated that there was a car off the road and felt there was somebody in the car who was dying. And we left our own vehicle and proceeded down the side of the hill. We found a maroon Volvo facing back up towards the road, which had an SNP symbol on the front left-hand corner of the windscreen, and to my amazement it was Willie MacRae, somebody who I had known personally for many years.
The next week, the papers carried the news. MacRae had been in a coma for more than 8 hours before being found on Saturday morning. He never regained consciousness and died in hospital early on Sunday. A few weeks later, MacRae's death certificate was lodged at Register House. It contained surprising news. According to the official report, MacRae had died of a gunshot wound to his head. The scenario painted by the authorities was simple. MacRae was known to carry an unlicensed .22 revolver. That night, he drove while drunk and crashed. In a fit of remorse, he was already facing a second drink driving charge. He turned his gun on himself. How did the gun apparently come to be some considerable distance away?
The revolver was recovered by police on the 7th of April 1985 from a burn directly below where the driver's door of the car had been. I wish further to emphasize the position of the gun when recovered. It was not found some distance from Mr. MacRae's car, as has been reported.
When we were removing MacRae's body from the car, the policeman's hat tumbled into the burn below the driver's door, and I retrieved that hat personally. And if the gun was found directly below the car, then I certainly didn't see it. I wasn't looking for it, obviously, because we thought it was a simple car crash. But there were 6 or 7 people there that day, and I dare say there were innumerable members of the constabulary there later on that day. We found them at 10:30. So if you're trying to tell me that all these people couldn't have seen the gun before 10:30 the next morning, that takes some believing.
2 pistols are not a terribly powerful gun, but even a powerful gun, after it was fired, would simply drop to the ground.
So if a gun was found a considerable distance away, it would have had to have been taken or thrown?
I would have thought so, yes.
And if the person who had done it was brain dead and could not throw it, could you think of an explanation?
I can't think of any explanation other than that some other party must have been involved.
Scottish Eye has spoken to a senior police source central to the investigation. He claims that MacRae shot himself while driving along the road. He says the car then spun off at speed and rolled several times, during which the gun fell out. That contradicts the Lord Advocate's implied scenario that MacRae crashed while drunk, then shot himself and dropped the gun. But it does appear to support the suicide theory. Or does it? If MacRae was brain dead when he left the road, how did the pile of papers come to be some 20 feet from the car?
There were some pieces of paper ripped up, and there may have been a credit card, but I wouldn't swear by that.
And how far from the car was this pile?
Certainly 20 or 25 feet, going back northeasterly towards the lay-by. In fact, the direction the car was facing, between the car and the road.
As if it had been placed there deliberately?
Well, I wouldn't like to say why it was there, but it was, you know, it was there, and it was in a tidy, compact bundle. It wasn't as if the paper was flying all over the place. It was... somebody had put it there.
What was your reaction when it was said that he had committed suicide?
I just couldn't believe it. My wife and I were absolutely astounded at this suggestion.
He couldn't have done it. That wasn't Willie, and everything was going well for Willie.
He did not commit suicide. I'm convinced that Willie was murdered.
I don't know whether the peculiar things happened before Willie was shot or whether they happened after Willie was shot, but it just doesn't add up. And I'm surprised that police and inquiries and everybody else have accepted that this, you know, as somebody committing suicide. No, it's all wrong, totally wrong, the whole situation.
There is also an argument about the site of the incident. Michael Strathern and Peter Finlay say it took place where stands the official cairn. Coutts disagrees. He maintains it took place more than a mile to the southeast. The confusion over the site matters. Coutts' site is here, a few hundred yards south of the border between the Lochaber and Inverness districts. And different districts mean different sets of legal authorities. According to those authorities, the car was found about 25 yards off the road at the site marked by the official cairn. But Coutts insists the car was much further from the road. We contacted Alan Crowe, the Australian tourist first on the scene. A completely independent witness, indeed he was unaware that MacRae had been shot until we told him, he says the Volvo was more than 100 yards off the road and he needed to use his binoculars to look at it. Significantly, he also says that the tyre marks indicated that the car had not left the road at speed. As if the story was not bizarre enough, Scottish Eye has spoken to 2 breakdown truck operators, one based in Fort Augustus and one based in Inverness. Both separately insist that it was their company which recovered the maroon Volvo belonging to MacRae. Debris collected by Michael Strathern on his site includes a radiator grille. Yet another close friend of MacRae, who did not want to appear in this programme, also collected debris, including a radiator grille. So now we have no less than 2 sites, 2 breakdown trucks, and 2 sets of debris. We asked Northern Constabulary if there had, by some extraordinary coincidence, been a second accident involving a maroon Volvo in the area. They declined to answer. 2 years after MacRae's death, the Scottish National Party asked its president, Winnie Ewing MEP, herself a respected lawyer, to conduct an inquiry into the death of its former vice chair. Her investigations took a year, but persistent requests for access to Crown Office files were denied. Eventually, in her final report, Mrs. Ewing concluded,
I regret I cannot, as I hoped, say to the National Executive Council that I am satisfied that Willie did commit suicide.
Following MacRae's death, there were persistent demands for a fatal accident inquiry, but all were refused. It is a supreme irony that a Scottish patriot such as MacRae was denied an inquiry which in England and Wales would have been mandatory. On the 11th of April 1990, the new Lord Advocate, Lord Fraser of Carmiley, issued another statement deploring the
continuing ill-founded speculation and discussion of increasingly fanciful and bizarre theories.
Willie MacRae died on Sunday the 7th of April 1985. In life, this remarkable man attracted fierce loyalty and fierce enmity. But there were other aspects of his work which would have made him unpopular in some quarters. Willie MacRae had a long association with militant groupings within the nationalist movement. He was associated for a time with an early version of Síl na Gael, or Seed of the Gael, which was later expelled from the SNP because of its militaristic style. Scottish Eye spoke to Adam Busby, a leading figure in the Scottish National Liberation Army.
Was Willie MacRae involved in the SNLA?
He was involved from February 1983 onwards. His first involvement was in the attack, the letter bomb attack on the city chambers in Glasgow. This coincided with the visit of Princess Diana, and the letter bomb exploded inside the city chambers, and it cast a shadow over the royal visit. It was a great propaganda coup for us.
What was his role?
His role was fairly minor. He allowed us to use his office, and we were there on various mornings. We were trying to discover the times of various mail deliveries within Glasgow. We actually followed postmen and so forth.
Coulport military base was the next target. Busby claims that MacRae approached them with a proposal that they plant 2 unprimed bombs on approach roads used by nuclear convoys.
The bombs, they weren't inert devices, they weren't hoaxes, they were actual bombs, but the timers weren't set because we didn't want the bombs to go off. We just wanted to draw people's attention to the fact that these convoys could be attacked, and they were therefore a risk to the public.
He was no terrorist. He didn't need to use terror. He used the power of his eloquence, the power of truth, to know the man, make the situation utterly laughable.
The fact remains that if MacRae was even suspected of being involved with SNLA activity, then he is certainly likely to have been under surveillance. In fact, there are suggestions he was watched long before any alleged involvement with the SNLA.
He knew he had been under surveillance, but he just didn't care.
I then left MacRae's office and saw a car which resembled one used by Special Branch in the immediate vicinity. It was a small light blue car with a black vinyl top, a Triumph I believe, and contained 2 men who were obviously watching me. It was almost certainly the Special Branch vehicle BGS 425S. When I reached George Square with Adam, I spotted another Special Branch vehicle, a PSG 136X.
Scottish Eye has investigated ownership of these cars. One was a blocked car on the police national computer, the other has a false number. In fact, we have established that both were Special Branch cars based in Strathclyde. Dinsmore went on to claim that MacRae had also told him of being followed to his holiday home by a brown car, registration number XSJ 432T. Scottish Eye has established that that car was a brown Chrysler owned and operated by the Special Branch in Strathclyde and later sold to a man in Telford. So was MacRae followed on the day of his shooting? All we have to go on is what was found the next day and the official story. But for his friends, the questions remain.